Hello, and welcome to our next NAP. NAP stands for Nonprofit Auditor Points, and my name is Irina Oreshkova, and I'm your nonprofit auditor. I designed these NAPs to provide some information and clarification for nonprofit community, its management and finance team to better understand some issues that relates to accounting and finance. These videos are not authoritative, it's just simply me sharing my opinion and my knowledge on various topics. Okay, let's start. Today, I would like to talk about Donor Advice Fund, or DAF. DAF becomes very popular lately, and a lot of nonprofits do receive donations from DAF. Therefore, there is a lot of questions arises. When nonprofit should record revenue from DAF? Is there any restrictions for funds that come from DAF? And who is really donor? Is it initial donor or it's a DAF? At what point donor can actually inform nonprofit that the donor gonna give money to DAF? And does nonprofit need to do anything about that notification? Okay, let's unwind. Donor advice funds became very popular in the past several years. Main reason because donor can actually donate funds to donor advice fund, advise where the funds will go, and take a full write-off of that donation when the funds went to donor advice fund. It's very comfortable mechanism because of the tax break that the donors can utilize. However, it also brings some legal issues. What it means that as soon as donor gave funds to DAF, donor fully, and I want to confirm, fully relinquish control over the funds. So what it means that now when donor gave irrevocably to a donor advice fund the right how to use the money, donor no longer has control over that funds. That means that sponsoring organization that managing the DAF has a sole responsibility and discretion how to distribute funds, when they distribute funds, and how much funds will be distributed and to what organization. Let me explain more detail what it means. DAF, donor advice funds, can consider donor recommendations but not obligated to follow them. This is a caveat. It's very critical. So what it means that when the donor give funds to DAF, assuming that the DAF will have to follow the recommendations that the donor gave, that's not correct. In practice, a lot of DAF do follow the recommendations. However, we've seen a lot of donations that donor advice funds can accept online, and we do see that they not always follow the recommendation of the donors. Donors can even select nonprofit that they can go to, but DAF can choose to give funds to another nonprofit, even for different mission, or in a different period. So what it means when full discretion now how to donate funds are with the DAF, when the DAF distribute funds to any nonprofit, that will be donation from DAF, not from initial donor. So what we see very often in practice happening, donor will communicate with the nonprofit saying that the donor planning to give donation to a nonprofit through DAF. And nonprofit have this letter and they waiting for the grant. Now, do nonprofit need to do anything with such letter? Answer, no, because that's not a promise, it's not a pledge to a nonprofit. When the donor saying, I'm planning to give money to DAF for your organization. Why? Because when donor again give funds to DAF, at that moment, any control over that funds are released, and donor does not have any say where this money will go. And the DAF can unilaterally decide who and when to give money to. So once again, if the donor inform nonprofit that the donor is planning to give funds to DAF, or maybe already gave funds to DAF, that's nothing for nonprofits. It's not the pledge, so nonprofits will not recognize revenue and receivable. So when do nonprofits need to recognize receivable and revenue? Only when they, nonprofit, receive a letter directly from DAF. Any money that comes from DAF considered to be received from DAF, not from initial donor. And only DAF now can either restrict the funds and donate the funds to nonprofit. Therefore, when DAF informs nonprofit that they planning to make a donation to a nonprofit, at that moment, when this donation becomes unconditional promise from DAF, will need to be recognized as revenue and receivable on nonprofit books. Another aspect, when the donor gives funds to DAF, donor can specify the restriction. Donor can say, I want these funds to be towards the improving, providing some shelters for homeless people in a city, or the donor can specify that he wants these funds go to animal shelter or specific shelter. And the donor can say that these funds, the donor wants to help specific community or specific event. DAF, again, can hear that recommendation, but does not have to give funds with that restriction. So unless DAF specifically indicates to a nonprofit that these funds designated for specific purpose or restricted for specific purpose, the funds then unrestricted. No donor restrictions, because again, for nonprofit, the donor is DAF, not the initial donor. So funds from DAF, the DAF becomes donor advised funds, is the donor. To it's wonderful then that if your nonprofit receive funds from DAF, it's absolutely great. However, it's probably not a bad idea to make donors who contribute through DAF aware that this is the DAF can not give money to that nonprofit. Also, DAF can give money in a different pay period. There is no time restriction when DAF can release the grant. DAF can keep the money for a year or two and then give it to that nonprofit. So therefore, it's a great idea for a nonprofit to educate donors who donate through DAF so they understand complexity of the donation process, and it will affect the cost that they care about. If they really want to help nonprofit and speed up the process, maybe they can give it directly to nonprofit. And it's also very helpful for nonprofit to understand when the revenue is become restricted or not restricted and they become revenue for nonprofit, and properly record donations from DAF on your books. Thank you so much. Hopefully that was helpful. If you have any questions, please do not hesitate to email me. My name is Irina Oreshkova, and my email is io@irinacp.com. I'm sorry. Once again, io@irinacp.com. Thank you and have a wonderful day. See you next time.